Hello and welcome to In the Light, Growing Your Soul with me, Anna Isabel. And I am an analytical hypnotherapist as well as a psychological astrologer. Today, I have Paul Weiss with me. Hello, Paul.
Hello, Anna.
Well, it's you are here because I have been enjoying your beautiful book, and I just love that cover. Um, it's called The Dharma of Direct Experience, Non-Dual Principles of Living. And I think it's captured my imagination because at the heart of it is the notion of oneness. But most importantly, I think for our very hurried times, it's an invitation to savor the moment. Would you agree?
Well, as I put it at the very beginning of the book, the moment is the only entranceway into what is real. In a sense, and that's actually very significant. The rest is representational. We see everything. When I use the word direct experience, it means that which we can apprehend not through the entire representational system of our elaborate thinking mind, but when there's another principle of knowing, which happens when that can relax. And I think that understanding is present. It's often presented very mysteriously in different wisdom traditions, perhaps according to their own nature. But there's a very basic mechanism there that has to do with the nature of our human consciousness. And I noticed that you had on a couple of days ago, his name was Avikal, I believe, and he really comes out of a very sister tradition. The process he was referring to is the same one I've been working with for years, that has opened up that capacity for direct experience that I work with and teach. So, what it's really saying is that, again, the nature that you can look at it in a certain scientific way, which in the past we didn't have the same language for doing, that we know that there are we talk about the 4-part brain, and there's the instinctive or reptilian, so-called reptilian brain, which is an instinctive fight or flight, etc. The limbic brain, which is more emotional capacity, attachment, protectiveness, all these kinds of things. And then this elaborate cognitive brain, supercomputer, but which, as brilliant as it is, works with representations. And what we're really doing in most of our life, we're reading out that representation that our brain is feeding us, saying, this is what reality is, this is how we are. And the only problem with that is it's not direct, and it's totally colored by what's going on in our stress system, in our history, in our emotional life. They each stimulate each other, and we tend to go round and round, for better or for worse, within this representational system, and living life within that. And then the prefrontal cortex has this capacity. That's where our capacity just to stay present comes from, and to integrate those other experiences, but not necessarily get attached, to just keep a kind of non-judgmental awareness or openness, a sense of presence, an ability to attune to another person, not through what we're projecting on them. It's that kind of openness. And in addition to that function, which is extremely valuable, of course, in our everyday life, it seems that that section of the brain, which is our most recently evolving section, also has the capacity to begin to integrate wider fields of understanding that our representational brain can't get, including the widest field of this interpenetrating oneness of being, which our normal representational system can't get. So our normal thinking is automatically dualistic, and it's only when we can relax that functioning that a wider perspective can come in and totally infuse or take over our very real experience in the moment. And that might be what could be called, an enlightenment experience, or a kensho, or an awakening, or this kind of thing, where there's an integration of this present moment experience in the full non-dual interpenetrating dimension of what everything is, which is totally beyond our verbal. And so I believe that's a human capacity, and people have experienced it at different times. And there are certain things that are conducive to being open to that experience. And from what I can tell, my experience is the two key things which should run through all of our lives is a fundamental intention to be open to the truth, because we have a lot of intentions in life to advance ourselves, to this and that, to protect ourselves. But when our intention is primarily to be open to the truth, and secondarily, we're practicing the capacity to be open, that is to say, which is what, we practice in meditation and other ways, that that dynamic, that fire or that crucible of pure intention and pure openness, which is not grasping anything. It's not like, oh, if I do this, I'll get that. But if I can rest in that, that is the open field in which that next level of brain functioning can happen, where we can somehow, the structures that we've been holding on to for so long just relax and fall away. And we simply experience something that is there when those structures fall away. And that's what I would call a direct experience. See, in the everyday sense, a direct experience is simply paying attention to what's there. But if we do that, the next level is a higher level of integration.
It does begin with that paying attention, and
Mm.
doesn't seem to matter whether you're wanting to meditate to clear your mind, or you're having to focus on your body, whether you're
Mhm.
having a conversation with another person. The minute you're having a conversation with another person and you're very present, it
Yes,
means that you are truly listening, you're
that's
truly engaged, and it means that the person experiences you as having an authentic and genuine interest in them, but
yes.
equally also you are tuning into that person, so you're really paying attention. It's
That word listening, the most common word, is the key word at the deeper and deeper levels, to just listen, because it's all here, right? The other person is just there. It's not your picture of them. Open up and see who they are. And then you'll see who you are together as well, Yeah.
being in that moment also means that you notice things. So I was walking in beautiful bluebell woods earlier today with my dog, and the bird song was gorgeous. And I have to say, although I usually 99% of the time enjoy the company of friends, today I found it to be an irritation, not because they were doing anything in particular, but because I felt the conversation was
Mhm.
taking me away from that experience of, and it was such a glorious thing because we had warmth from the air, we had the scent of the flowers, we had the beauty of the color,
Mhm.
and I and the sound of the birds, and I just wanted to be completely immersed in that without distraction. So I think that's a small example, but I think what I'm wanting to say is that my irritation was that in that moment where I wanted to be completely immersed in
Mhm.
the experience of the moment, my mind was being drawn to a conversation about a topic that actually I found somewhat distressing. So there was a contrast between what
Mhm.
was going on in the head and what my body was wanting to experience all around me. And I know which one I preferred in that moment. So this is the conflict very often, isn't it? The
And
distraction.
yes, another word I sometimes use for all this, like listening, is attunement. The ability to attune, which is what happens when all the other mental functions and distractions fall away. To attune to another person, you were really wanting to attune to the bird song and to the natural environment. And when we attune, we become one with it, and we can even disappear into it. And that's a wonderful experience. And you were obviously hungry for that at that moment. Yeah.
Yes, um, it's a very important thing because we talk about it, but very often we pay lip service to it. We're
Mhm.
better at it in some respects than others. So we might get lost in music, for instance. So we might be listening, and that's a really good example of a moment where we are fully present very often because we get lost in that music. We might want to dance, or we might just want to experience it. Um, a conversation with someone. if we're really truly listening, doing
Mhm.
what they call active listening,
Mhm.
that connection, that's often the case. But we are so easily distracted, aren't we?
Mhm. Well, I think that's where a spiritual practice as a general, set phrase, in the best sense of the word, comes in. It's preparation for helping us to orient towards and attune to how we would be if we were fully capable of attuning to this underlying reality and this unifying reality all the time. So one level is you might say of spiritual teaching is just to give us good instructive advice about how to be present, how to honor the other the way you would honor yourself, all that kind of thing. And then how to begin to operate in a way that's consistent with that, not getting lost in your projections, your thoughts, your or selfish projections, but to listen in, to, you might say, to surrender to the moment, to hold presence for another person, to hold presence for this moment. But as we're doing that, that's not only valuable in and of itself as a way to live, but it's also preparing the ground in which that next level of awakening or seeing or integration can occur. So that next level of spiritual experience. And so what I'm saying though is that it does, at some point it takes deliberate practice. We can randomly have experiences like that, but at some point we have to make it a life intention to cultivate that.
That's right, because I'm just thinking, in particular for people who are developing, say, mediumship, or
Mhm.
want to develop the ability to communicate with plants or animals. This is how it begins, and then that practice, because it's listening to the subtle things. It's not, if you're wanting to develop to that level and you're expecting big experiences, it doesn't happen like that. It's subtlety. So you're sitting and you notice that maybe you feel like you're growing taller. Pay attention to that and think, oh, what is that? Well, that's the beginning of perhaps another energy building in around you.
Uh-huh.
So but that's a very subtle thing, and you have to really be paying attention and
And
note small things.
you're also saying, in a sense, surrender to what's going on rather than having your own idea of what should be going on, and pay attention. Yeah.
Yeah,
In Zen, certainly in Buddhism, there's a very important teaching or idea of this, what's called a mirror-like awareness, where the field of your awareness is, you're not projecting anything into the field, you're just mirroring what's there. And as we do that, we're open to subtler and subtler threads of what's going on in the moment, in the environment. So
I like that. I like that very much. There was something else that you were talking about, which is the idea of integration. And the reason I thought that was particularly interesting is because, again, there's so much across different traditions about the importance of integration. And I'm thinking it permeates the whole of astrology, from the point of view that you've got the duality of opposites, and you've got, again, in alchemy, the idea of masculine, feminine, and the aim always is integration, the integration of the opposites, coming back to one, and the zodiac wheel beginning at one end and completing the circle, so that we're
mhm.
going back to the whole again. So tell us more about that from your perspective, how you see it.
Integration is a great word. I think it's as much of a key word or stand-in for everything we're talking about. I mean, along with listening, integration is really, because the life, one of the early chapters of my book, talking about it, one of my early, very profound experiences, I use the phrase that emerged out of the experience, inexhaustible non-exclusiveness, which means when you really open to what's going on, you never get to the end of how much everything is integral and inclusive of everything else, that all of our projections of separateness are, are false, are just a temporary idea. And that at every level, from our everyday level, integration means bringing the different parts together and seeing how they function together as a whole. And I think that that word is a great word at the most common level of what is mental health, physical health, that kind of thing, all the way up to the highest level of experiencing. Because what starts out at our level is the healthiness of being able to integrate the parts and have them work in harmony, rather than the tendency of the mind to split and separate and be in conflict. What we ultimately realize is it's not that there's just an integration of a lot of parts, it's that everything is one from the beginning. What we call integration is just the outpicturing or the outrealization that everything is a harmonic whole. And you could say that that term integration goes from the most common or everyday practical level of healing and integration to the most cosmic experience of it's all one, and it's all part of a, like on a spectrum. And the listening, the intent listening, is what prepares the ground also for that.
There's the title of one of your chapters, which I really liked, When Nothing Experiences Itself as Everything.
That's this.
Yeah, I thought that really captures that beautifully. And there was a quote as well that I've written down that I really like. Letting my eyes go soft, I stopped turning things into objects.
I have that. I did a calligraphy of that and put that on my front porch. It seems so important. Oh, yes, yeah. And that not only we turn things into objects, but not only do we turn them into objects, but we turn them into objects according to our own projection, including turning each other into the objects. And that can work relatively well. I mean, it's what we go through in life, for better or for worse. But ultimately, it's false and it's limiting.
It's useful because, sorry, it's useful because in order to live, we have to know that a tablet is a tablet and food is food. And so it's very useful, but it's
Right.
also really good to switch that off. And I'm just thinking about different forms of meditation and techniques to help people get into hypnosis with that is that softening of the eyes and not turning things into objects, because what you're actually doing then is you're opening your imagination, you're opening your mind, and
Your right brain.
exactly, it's connecting with the right brain so that you're able to perceive beyond what you might think is objective reality.
Yeah, you might say objective reality is the booby prize.
I like that very much. So we've been talking a lot about direct experience and its importance. Tell us about Dharma, because that's not a term that everyone is familiar with.
Well, of course, the Dharma is a Sanskrit word. It has a lot of levels of meaning, and in Buddhism, it has different levels of meaning. Dharma means the way, it means the law, the principle of how things are. It also means the principle of how to behave, how to act, and it can be used in a lot of different ways. It can be used in ways, that actually codify and then impose, ways of being on people. But fundamentally, it is the innate nature of reality. And in the Buddha Dharma, in a sense, is the Dharma insofar as the Buddha is expounding on the nature of reality. So that's the Buddha's teaching, is the Dharma. The Dharma is also part and parcel of that, is the path of practice by which we become open to reality. And at another level, again, I say Dharma is the nature of being itself, because that's what we're opening to, so it's all those things.
I found it very curious that one of your chapters is looking at Jesus's Dharma, and it's not something that we're used to seeing is a Buddhist term being applied to Jesus. what made you make that connection?
Though most of my practice, in beginning at a very young age, I was practicing Zen meditation, even my teens, and that's very much my foundation. But over the course of my lifetime, I have really devoted myself to a lot of paths of study and devotion, and I have a very strong affinity for Jesus. And some of my Buddhist students would be disconcerted when they'd find me talking more about Jesus than the Buddha, because he's right there, you know. And in I believe that one of the things, as I mentioned in the book in great detail, that inspired me a great deal was reading some of the interpretations of Jesus in the original Aramaic, as largely from the work of a scholar named Neil Douglas Klotz. And he uses the Aramaic words to show the inner meanings and resonances of meaning that would have been more heard by people listening to Jesus, that gets lost once you translate it into Greek and then translate it into Latin, and even to the point of things that are feminist terms become masculine terms. I mean, this is total change. When you soften it, it's a way of softening the teaching and bringing it back into what Jesus, all the resonances of what Jesus is saying. It was the whole Dharma, the same Dharma is right there, and none of the, to my mind, it's Dharma as opposed to dogma, whether it be Buddhism or whether it be Christianity. And if you look at Christianity from the point of view of Dharma as opposed to dogma, it's all right there. So in that book, in that one chapter in the book, I go through both the Lord's Prayer and the Beatitudes, bringing in those other resonances of meaning. And at the very end, it's actually one of my favorite places in the whole book. It was a beautiful experience to become one with. At the end of that chapter, I re-speak the Beatitudes in a kind of conversational Dharma kind of way. And it was very transporting for me as I did it. And when I still go back to it, I say, wow, if I was to keep the one part of that book, I really love that. So
I really like the idea of wanting to understand the Lord's Prayer and the Beatitudes more in the context of the language of the time, because language has changed, quite aside from issues of translation, which there are often many. It's the fact that we don't use language in that metaphoric way that was so often used.
that's right. That's true.
In Jesus's time. So
that's right. Aramaic is filled with it.
It's the language itself is redolent with it, but it's also the stories that will have layer upon layer upon layer of meaning. And it's just making me think about Matthew Wood, who was on this program a few months back, talking about how the Old Testament actually is showing that we're dealing with a shamanic tradition at its origin. Yes. And I thought, of course, makes
one interesting example. Focus here, Weiss. In kingdom, the word for kingdom, what's translated as kingdom in English, is actually a word that implies a realm of being. It's not masculine or feminine. In fact, the Greek word for it is feminine, basileia. And the word, I'm just drawing a blank, Malkuta is the kingdom of God. Malkuta is a realm of being, a realm of potency. And in fact, the word Malkuta comes from the original name for the goddess of the earth. So it has a feminine, and it's that which we will inherit. Of course, we'll inherit the earth. So, I mean, there's so many overlays and things that are contradictory to how it's come down to us. And a lot of it is because it's come through these other languages and cultural traditions, which is not what the Middle Eastern.
Because anyone who has had experience of translating a conversation or a text knows that translation is fraught, because words have connotations that are not always translatable. So to find the equivalent in a foreign language is a
Language may not even have a reference point for, yeah, because it's not part of your cultural tradition. Yeah.
exactly. And then you add to that the dimension of time, and you can see how tricky the whole business becomes.
You add personal motivation or dogma or what, you know, what you're trying to, what the, yeah,
Yes, so and that's without even factoring personal filters. Yes,
right.
absolutely. So this is
Churchill.
where I was really very excited to find that chapter in your book. I hadn't come across anything quite like it. So I appreciate that very much. How did you begin on this journey?
The whole journey.
The whole journey. How did you
Well, it
begin?
goes back. Well, I'll just say quickly that it's kind of been there from the beginning. It's been something instinctive in me as I, you know, each according to what was appropriate, you know, to my age of looking out there. But at some point, even by 13, I was reading mythology. I was fascinated with Tibet. I was, you know, on a path where by 16, I discovered Zen. And as soon as I discovered Zen, I said, that's it. I'm a Zen Buddhist. And as soon as I found that there was a Zen teacher in America, I went right and began to study. So I was on a very, you know, track from the beginning. Um, and it, you know, it blossomed in different directions from there in the midst of a normal, you know, messy family life, but where also my work also quickly became work that reinforced and supported my focus on this work, the nature of the teaching work and the healing work and the counseling work that I did, and then retreats and workshops. So I've been many years, really from the 60s into the 80s, practicing, and before I began to teach in the 80s, and been going ever since then. And back in the early 80s, began offering, I discovered this retreat, which is the same process that your other interviewee was talking about,
I've
that
been talking
brings together,
about
yeah, how we call it, communication and contemplation. So what really is doing is taking it's the guy who developed it, Charles Berner, said, what's the essence of what allows people to awaken to that next level? And there has to be a process by which we are completely open, but then also there's this process of getting it across, of communicating. And what was interesting to me as I understood that process, and we were talking before about attunement and eye contact, is that when we're born, you know, in this wide open field, and before we've projected a fixed reality or dualistic reality, there's this bonding. And in the first eye contact with the mother, or I suppose with others, but presumably, hopefully, with the mother, that pure open eye contact without that pure attunement actually literally awakens a certain neural pathways in the body, which are whole body pathways, and which are the pathways that will forever allow us to attune to other people and have empathy for what's going on. And similarly, it's the same pathway that allows us to tune into ourselves and feel ourselves and have empathy for ourselves. So there's this. So our own self-empathy is a gift of that first engagement with the other. And what I realized about this process of the was originally called the Enlightenment Intensive, and I teach it under the name True Heart, True Mind. In fact, I'm doing one in 3 weeks if any of your people are interested. Is that in being present for yourself wholly in contemplation, being available to another wholly in eye contact with someone who is there only to rest in that eye contact with you, we're almost recreating that original openness of being, of unity, that begins to allow and support, you might say, the structures of unity within us to begin to awaken, as opposed to all the things that happen since that distanced us from each other and from reality. So it's a very beautiful, potent
I was
process.
thinking about that, how beautiful that is. So I think it would be good to find out about this retreat that you're doing, or this course that you're doing. Tell us how people can find you.
Well, to go to my website, which is The Whole Health Center, WHOLE, thewholehealthcenter.org. And It'll all be there. Everything, really a record of all the work we've done for the last 40 years. And right on the home page, there'll be it'll mention True Heart, True Mind. And there's lots of information about it on our website, and you can register through the website.
And the dates for
The
this?
dates are June 8th through 20th. It starts on a Thursday evening and it goes through a Monday morning. We do an integration session on Monday morning. And it's described in great detail on the site. It's very intense and very beautiful. I mean, it's very supportive, but you really need, it's intense in that there's no running away from it. You have to be there for it. Yeah.
You have to be in the moment.
So the website will fill in a lot, and it also, I just want to put in a quick plug because this book has a sister book. Now I feel like I'm doing an infomercial, which is this original one called Moonlight Leaning Against an Old Rail Fence. And they come at a lot of the same material from a different way. This one, which wrote some years ago, came out of, I'm also a poet, so I selected 40 of my poems that had a spiritual teaching imbued in them, and I gave the poem with a commentary on each one. In this case, which this book came to me by surprise, there's a certain similarity. It's like I was sitting and appreciating and feeling gratitude for the experiences I'd been given. And I said, wait a minute, I should share them as experiences, not just have that be my secret trove, So I started writing this book in which I tried to document each of my most significant experiences, followed by commentary on that, how it fits into a greater perspective. And then in the second section of the book is, what does this imply about how we should be living our lives to make us available for this? So that's what that book is about.
Well, I'm going to be putting a link to the book in the description box, as well as to your website, so that people can find out more and hopefully join your course. Thank you so much, Paul, for your time today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure talking with you. Love your energy. Hope we'll do it again.
I'm sure we will. I'm just thinking about that other book you've written.
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
Thank you all for watching. Next time, we're going to be looking at herbs and gut health. Until then, goodbye.